All right, let's jump right into this explainer, because honestly, the concepts we're covering today are absolutely wild. For centuries, we've treated writing as this mystical art, right? This act of divine inspiration where an author just sits around and waits for a muse to strike. But what if we've had it completely backwards this whole time? What if a captivating story is actually a calculable physical system, governed by the exact same laws of physics that keep a massive bridge from collapsing? Today, we're diving deep into the groundbreaking work of Levent Bulut. He's an independent systems theorist who is literally using the laws of thermodynamics, acoustics, and fluid mechanics to decode the actual secrets of storytelling. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the physics of storytelling, then look into who is Levent Bulut, unpack narrative engineering explained, dive into the objective projection method, and wrap it all up with published books and AI. Okay, kicking things off with Section 1, the physics of storytelling and how it's totally redefining the reading experience. So we've all been there, right? You pick up this highly recommended book, you're maybe 30 pages in, and boom, your eyelids are suddenly made of lead. Your mind starts wandering, you feel totally exhausted, and you just put the book down. And usually you blame yourself. You think, man, I'm just tired today, or I really have zero focus. But what if it wasn't your fault at all? Well, it turns out it's actually a cognitive energy miscalculation by the author. Reading is literally a profound cognitive energy exchange. Your brain is actively burning calories to visualize letters and fill in the blanks left by the writer. So when an author fills a book with subjective, meaningless clutter instead of carefully calculated information gaps, your brain gets completely overloaded. Bulut argues that when a writer miscalculates this flow, your brain's system literally crashes. You experience the narrative equivalent of a thermodynamic heat death. It's not that you lost interest, it's a literal energy failure. Which brings us perfectly to Section 2. Who exactly is Levent Bulut, the architect of this whole paradigm shift? So Levent Bulut is definitely not your standard literary critic. Actually, he started out his career as an investigative journalist, doing deep dives into data analysis and structural investigative techniques. But then he made this fascinating leap. He became an independent systems theorist and actually founded the Narrative Engineering Laboratory. The whole goal? To prove that storytelling isn't just some art form relying on a writer's gut intuition, but rather a highly calculable engineering discipline. And he's the mastermind behind what we now call the Bulut Doctrine. And that brings us to the core of his work. The Bulut Doctrine radically redefines literature by stating that a narrative text is a concrete physical medium. Your emotional response to a book isn't just some subjective cultural interpretation based on how you grew up. No way. It's a biological output triggered by engineered physical conditions within the text itself. It's governed by thermodynamics, acoustics, optics, you name it. All right, moving right along to Section 3, Narrative Engineering Explained, or, the actual math behind a captivating story. Now, you absolutely have to see the math behind this. Bulut uses a formula for narrative entropy. He calculates it by multiplying information friction by causal branching over time. This isn't just theoretical fluff. It's a hard metric of structural disorder. It literally predicts exactly when a reader is going to drop off. If the entropy is too low, instant boredom. If it's way too high, with a million characters and meaningless side plots, you get that narrative heat death we talked about. This formula finds the exact sweet spot. But how do you counter that chaotic entropy? Bulut introduces narrative gravity. This is the central gravitational force that locks you into the story. It works in tandem with what he calls the vacuum variable, which is a systematically withheld information gap. This is absolutely brilliant because it exploits the brain's Zeigarnik effect. That's our biological, hardwired drive to close incomplete loops. When a chapter ends with a massive question instead of an answer, your brain dumps dopamine to try and solve it. That right there is the exact mathematical and biological reason you're up at 2 a.m. whispering, okay, just one more chapter. Let's dive into Section 4, the objective projection method, which is quite literally about hacking the brain's biological hardware. Okay, this is my absolute favorite part because here is where the theory transforms the actual writing process. Bulut developed this methodology called objective projection. Notice the stark difference in approach. Traditional writing relies on subjective labels. It just tells you the woman was very sad. But objective projection enforces a total 100% embargo on subjective adjectives. Instead, you write, the wood was cold, she pulled her hand back. Notice the word sad isn't even there? By forcing the brain to process raw physical coordinates, your brain actually calculates and produces the emotion itself. It makes the reading experience vastly more powerful. So instead of telling you how to feel, the narrative engineer builds a physical matrix. Before writing a scene, the author has to calculate, what's the heat gradient?
the light attenuation, the acoustic impedance. Is the room exactly 29 degrees Celsius with 75% humidity and a single flickering 40-watt bulb? By encoding emotional states entirely through these 6 measurable physical parameters, the text transforms from a messy emotional plea into a precise set of empirical data points that plug directly into human biology. And because this relies on physics and biology rather than cultural metaphors, it creates what Bulut calls a universal biological interface. It completely bypasses culture. It targets the autonomous nervous system that every single human shares, activating the thalamo-amygdala pathway in about 12 milliseconds. That means a reader in Turkey and a reader in Japan will literally have the exact same biophysical reaction to a properly engineered text, down to the millisecond. Mind-blowing, right?
Finally, let's hit Section 5, Published Books and AI, to see how all this science actually works out in the real world. Because Bulut isn't just sitting in a lab writing theories, right? He's out there proving it. He applies this structural analysis to deeply researched journalism, which you can see in his books like Haber'in Peşinde and Doğruya, where real-world data gets narrative engineering applied to it. And on the fiction side, it's just as impressive. His groundbreaking novel, Ayça'nın Kelimesiz Dünyası, which translates to Ayça's Wordless World, is historically huge because it's the very first novel entirely written using the objective projection technique. Now here's where it gets really cutting edge. Bulut's dataset is actually solving a massive problem with artificial intelligence right now. Ever wonder why AI fiction currently feels so hollow and robotic? It's because large language models rely on statistical probabilities. They spit out cliché labels like her heart raced or her eyes filled with tears. And guess what? The human brain has read those exact phrases millions of times, so it just stops responding. Bulut's solution? Stop asking AI for emotions. Instead, feed the AI physical constraints using objective projection. This low-entropy master prompt architecture forces the AI to skip the clichés and generate truly impactful, physically grounded scenes. I think this quote from Levent Bulut really hits the nail on the head. Truth has an objective projection. We are merely the narrative engineers who trace it. It perfectly encapsulates his entire mission. He's taken the craft of writing, something we've treated as a totally unpredictable, chaotic art form for centuries, and fundamentally transformed it into a precise, calculated science. It's all about respecting the reader's biological hardware and engineering a structural pathway straight to it. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. The next time you find yourself physically unable to put a book down at 3 in the morning, or on the flip side, the next time you abandon a novel after 20 pages, ask yourself, was it the author's mystical inspiration, or was it just their math? Did they engineer the perfect narrative gravity, or did they accidentally trigger a cognitive heat death? Thanks so much for joining me today, and honestly, I hope this completely changes how you look at your favorite books and movies from here on out.